Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of the Flychain Reaction. Today, we're talking about AI in ABA, which, if you've been to any conference recently or scrolling on LinkedIn, over the last year, you know that it is the topic, and every practice owner is being pitched like a new AI tool every other week. And some of this is real, some of this I will say is noise, and almost none of those conversations are happening with someone who has actually run an ABA clinic themselves. You're kind of on the buyer side of the fence. And so today, that's why things are a little bit different. And our guest isn't necessarily like an AI expert who picked ABA. He's a BCBA who he ran a multi-state ABA company for nearly a decade, wound up selling it, and then went to build the AI tools that he wishes he had. So with that, I'm really excited to be joined today by Adam Ventura, founder and CEO of Intraverbal AI. Adam, how's everything going, man?
It's going great. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm excited to have this discussion today.
Yeah, likewise. And we've gotten to know each other, over the last probably year now, and have always been, I think, learn a lot from you because of your, experience, but also would love to learn more about what you're building too. So maybe, Adam, if you wouldn't mind, I know I gave a little bit of a intro to your background, but I always find it helpful. Our audience loves learning from, listening from, ABA operators themselves. And so maybe just to set the stage, would love to just learn a little bit more about yourself and your journey here in this universe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually been in behavior analysis for, I think somebody asked me the other day, I had to think about it. It's been about 22 years that I've been in the field. So it's been quite a while.
Yeah.
When I tell everybody that I kind of fell into the field, I had a degree in psychology, didn't know what to do with it. Somebody recommended behavior analysis, tried it out, liked it. Ended up staying in the field, and I've worked in just about every setting you can think of. I started working with adults, eventually transitioned to working with adolescents and then kids. I've worked in organizational behavior management. I did that for about 3 or 4 years, doing consulting work. Yeah, I've worked in a variety of different settings in behavior analysis. I started my ABA company in 2011, I think, 2010, and then sold it 2018, 2019. So yeah, almost a decade. And after that, I moved into the software space in ABA, and it has changed dramatically
Yes.
since I started on that side of things, roughly in 2017. So it's been an interesting journey on both paths.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed probably since 2017 and also has changed a lot in the last 12 months as well from a
Yes.
software development standpoint, AI tooling as obviously the topic of today's conversation here. One of the fun things that like we always focus on at Flychain obviously is the financial side of the fence. And something that I think you mentioned when we first met that like it really caught my ear was like it was 100%, not 90% of behavioral analysts, BCBAs who run companies like struggle with their finance. So I'd actually love to get your perspective and why do you think that is? And I have an idea just based on, the couple of hundred of folks that we work with, but would love like your purview, especially as that kind of clinician owner, maybe some of the challenges that you faced on that side of the fence.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the most obvious answer is BCBAs went to school for behavior analysis and
Yeah.
psychology. We didn't go to school to become accountants or finance experts or anything like that.
Right.
And we kind of learned to operate the finance side, on the fly. No pun intended, fly
Yeah.
chain. Uh,
Love the
so,
book.
and I'm sure you understand this. When you start a company, regardless of the industry, you wear all the hats,
Yeah.
and then as you hire more people, you take off hats. And we all kind of wear the accountant hat. And something that I learned early on is to run a business in any industry, you have to have some basic understanding of not only finance, but taxes. Taxes is hugely important. How do you categorize your expenses? How do you do that correctly? Do you file on a cash basis or on an accrual basis? These are all things that you learn along the way. And I'll say one more thing really quickly that I noticed recently is when I started my ABA company in 2010, versus now in 2026. I don't know if you've noticed this, but QuickBooks looks a lot different than it did then versus now. It looks extremely convoluted now.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about all the ads that pop up everywhere, but all the different features and the terminology has changed. So, you almost have to be a tax, I don't want to say expert, but you have to be reasonably knowledgeable in taxes and accounting to be able to run your business correctly, because you don't want to get surprised at the end of the quarter or the end of the year with some extra expense, or you categorize something incorrectly, you have to pay back taxes, whatever it is. So it's complicated. And last thing I'll say is, yes, you can hire an accountant. Yes, you can hire somebody to run finances at your company, but to make good decisions at your organization, you have to understand the way things work as well. So it can't just be something that you delegate to someone else. And that's something that it took me years to really understand.
I totally hear that. It's kind of what we see and feel, especially with our earlier stage, companies, BCBA owned businesses. It is a learning curve, and these are our customers are really good at reading, interpreting data. They just haven't seen this type of data and kind of exercised those muscles previously. Before we certainly jump into kind of the AI kind of side of this conversation, I would love to just double back a little bit more around World Evolve and the business that you did have previously. And I think our audience learns a lot, especially maybe from some of those like growing pains that you maybe experienced. Like maybe just walk us through the first couple years of that journey. I'm sure that's feeling like maybe ages ago, but anything, maybe things that you wish that you knew back then, especially when you're getting started, that first year, 2 years are always, I think, a little bit more difficult as you're getting things up and running, getting familiar with the way that this universe works. But yeah, anything top of mind there that you might think worth sharing with the audience?
Yeah, you've got me thinking of finance now and taxes and accounting. So I think my answer is going to exist in that realm here.
Yeah.
But when I first got started, I ended up changing the name of my company like 3 times.
Mhm.
And eventually we got to a place where there's two different, and I'm trying to remember the structure, but there's two different ways that you can organize multiple brands. So you can have a branded house or a house of brands. And that matters for your organizational structure, and it matters for taxes and accounting. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because when I got into the field of behavior analysis, or when I opened my company, I was like, okay, I can do what was being called at the time ABA therapy, but there were so many other things that I wanted to do. I wanted to do training. I was interested in software at the time as well. I was interested in research. So we ended up creating a house of brands. So we called it World Evolve. And under that branded house, we had We Therapy, we had We Train as our training division, we had We Portal as our software division, and we added these other we's along the way. It sounded cool.
Yeah.
It sounded team oriented. And then I was like, okay, well, seems like a good idea to separate these into multiple companies. And the thing that I had learned early on is the importance of setting up an S Corp versus
Yeah.
maybe an LLC or something like that. And then I had this really interesting moment because I was like, okay, I'm going to set up World Evolve as our parent S Corp, and then all of these individual companies as individual S Corps. But then I realized that a parent S Corp can't technically own individual S Corps underneath it. And there's all sorts of complicated tax implications to all of this structure. And I'll never forget, I got on a call with our corporate attorney, and he said, I'm not sure, let's get on the call with the accountant group. And we had like 3 attorneys on the call and like 3 accountants on the call. That one phone call cost me like $3,000,
I
and it
was
was
gonna
like an
say.
hour long. Yeah, and I didn't understand. Nobody seemed to understand how to make that work. What I was trying to do was really complicated. So I would say, like, I wish in the very beginning I would have taken. I don't know if there's in the accounting world maybe a tax course for
Yeah.
business owners, something like that. I think that would have been really beneficial for me.
Totally, man. And you're right. Like the implications of setting things up day one and how things can evolve. No pun intended on your on that side either, but they can have like pretty serious ramifications as you grow that business, whether that's like a outsized tax burden that you have to pay to the IRS. So appreciate that little insight. I now want to switch gears and really talk more about what did you learn running that business and what kind of led you to build your current company. I think that is maybe a great place to start, and then we can maybe peel the onion on AI and what does that mean in ABA. But I think now that you've spoken about your experience, we'd love to learn a little bit more about what you're up to and the lessons you learned and what inspired you to build Intraverbal.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think any business in any industry, for if it's going to be successful, it's going to solve a problem. And I think it's going to solve one of two problems. It's either going to bring a product or service to the market that does not exist, or it's going to bring a product or service to the market that exists, but the one that you're doing does it better in some way. So I sat down and I thought about all of the problems that exist in ABA. And most of the problems that exist in ABA are not clinical problems. So most of the behavior analysts out there are hardworking, smart people that know how to solve behavior problems with the clients that they're working with. But the struggle that most of us run into is depending on where you work. If you're a company owner, the struggle is with logistics really, and you're focused a lot on recruitment and retention. That's really the type of business that you're in. If you're a practitioner, then you're worried about reporting, progress notes, session notes, reauthorization reports. So we wanted to solve some of those problems, and we were actually doing a little bit of machine learning before the AI craze
Right.
hit, maybe about 3 years ago. So we were doing
Yeah.
a little bit of that. And then ChatGPT came on the scene and we're like, wow, there's so many different things that we can do with this. So we thought, hey, we can start helping behavior analysts solve problems. And the very first problem we wanted to solve was evidence-based care. So everybody talks about doing evidence-based care, but nobody can bring with them 30,000 journal articles to a therapy session. At least they couldn't at the time. So we wanted to try to figure out a way to do that. And with this really powerful tool, this AI tool, we were able to allow therapists to bring the research with them to their therapy session. And once we saw that we could solve one of these really difficult problems, we started solving others.
I love it. Yeah, I agree. It's like you have the firsthand experience, and what better way to, or what better perspective to build something than this is a problem that I encountered firsthand. What can we do to help it? Totally resonates. Similar to Flychain, we kind of put ourselves more in that bucket of we're just building something. Yeah, accounting exists, but not accounting and fintech, if you will, for ABA. So that's the approach we take. Maybe just to take a step back a little bit on just like AI and ABA today. I would love maybe your perspective, especially being in the throes of this today. For an owner who's being like pitched a new AI tool, what does AI and ABA actually like mean to us today, and how do you see that manifest itself? I certainly have some perspectives, but I'd love maybe from your perspective, both at your company and then also maybe some of the other things that we're seeing pop up in this ABA universe.
So the very first phrase that I used when I started talking publicly about AI is AI and ABA should not mean artificial intelligence. It should mean augmented intelligence. So there's very few industries or fields that are more human than ABA.
Totally.
The whole purpose of what we do is human beings helping other human beings be better human beings. Like that's basically the mission statement of what we do. So I think it's absolutely critical to approach it from that perspective. Now, first question you asked there was, owners or people that are looking to integrate, let's say, AI into their business or the work that they're doing. I made this joke at a presentation a few weeks ago that I run into owners all the time and they'll say, well, we need AI at our company. I'm like, okay, what would you like to use it for? What problem do you want to solve? And they're like, well, we want to stay on the forefront of technology. And they, every time I ask the question, they kind of work around it, and they just keep saying we want AI in the company. And I've gotten to this place where, I've talked to these owners and I've said, listen, that's great, but if you have bad systems, bad workflows, and you integrate this really powerful technology, you're just going to end up automating your bad systems and bad workflows. So I would say, to answer your original question, for the company owners that are out there that are looking to integrate this technology, think first about the problem that you want to solve. Then we can find the appropriate technology that'll help you solve it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that notion too, because like automating something that's not working well it's like an exercise in futility. You'll just get to the wrong answer or wrong outcome maybe faster. And so totally hear that. I think like the other things too that we always maybe prescribe our customers, I'd be curious to hear your input on like how to like evaluate these new AI solutions. And I think what you've said is a really good first principle, which is this a problem that I have internally, or is this a workflow problem that actually maybe can be automated because we're doing the work correctly? It's just not done, it's all done manually today, as an example there. So like I'll give an example. Like we see a lot of like RCM billing companies that will tout like AI RCM. And I raise my eyebrows oftentimes to that, which is okay, like, are we actually leveraging AI and automation in a way that's like having better outcomes? Or does that just mean that that business can maybe serve more customers, but without a different collection rate, as an example? So yeah, I'm curious, like we see it all the time now, whether that's like AI scribe note taking, right? As like one piece of that operational puzzle. Like AI voice receptionists at a front desk, right? There's kind of like AI for all of these different point solutions. I'm curious, Adam, like from your lens, do you think it makes sense more to like try and find these like AI point solutions, or is this something that you think like an EMR can solve? And then obviously, like, would love to learn more about your approach to implementing your solution in this broader universe, because it is convoluted and it feels like every EMR is launching some new AI point solution, but then you've got all these other point solutions that are kind of standalone and will plug into these EMRs. I know it's a bit of a nebulous question, but I'd be curious to hear how you as an owner, or maybe like for our audience of owners, like how should they think about evaluating some of these tools, and also think about implementing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna jump around here a little bit with my
Mhm.
answer, and I'm gonna say that focus on your KPIs. So your KPIs are should be the measures that indicate the success and wellness of your company, kind of all at once. And a good company has a good balance of KPIs, that they're looking at. So they're key performance indicators. I always think a good organizational scorecard is balanced,
Yeah.
in one way or another. So I would say take a before and after approach, to measure the outcomes and say, is our net revenue increasing? Is our client satisfaction increasing? Is our recruitment and retention increasing? Something, and people always ask, what measures do we start with? And one of the ones that I like to recommend are time-based measures.
Yeah.
And something occurred to me a few months ago. I was actually speaking at a conference. I think it was at APBA, and it kind of came to me on stage when I was speaking that we tend to monetize the concept of time. So whenever we use time-based terminology, we monetize it. So we say save time, spend time, waste time. So I think that that's typically a good place to start and say, I'll give you a perfect example.
Yeah.
So our assessment tool, one of the tools that we developed at Intraverbal, we got some feedback from about 340 BCBAs and said, we ran a survey and said, how many hours are you spending doing an initial assessment? And they said, on average, we get from the insurance companies or payers 8 to 10 hours to complete the assessment. Then I asked, how long does it take you to actually complete it? Not how much you
Right.
got approved for, how much does it actually take you to do it? And they said 18 to 20 hours. So there's a delta of about 10 hours. Then we let them use our system and our tool, and they got it down to about 3 to 4 hours to complete the assessment. And
Yep.
then we asked, how much of that time have you spent with the clients? And they said like 80% of our time was spent with the clients, and it only took us 3 to 4 hours to complete it. So there's a clear objective measure that you can use to evaluate whether or not you're solving a problem at your organization. And in this case, it was the amount of time that the BCBA saved completing an assessment. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I think measuring time is a really easy proxy to determine how effective is this tool or new workflow, et cetera, that we've put in place there. I also like to always think about not just like the KPIs, but also kind of almost like I don't want to get like skeptical here, but almost like sniffing through the actual like truth of the value in one of these solutions. Because I think like everything is always better on paper. And like when it goes from paper to practice, I think sometimes you lose some of that. So, I'll give an example here from our end, like implementing a new AI RCM external solution there. Like, I think the KPIs are going to be like, okay, what are your collection rates, et cetera? What are the denial rates as well as the rebilling, and how are you able to like go and track those things down? It's almost like taking the time to understand, okay, how much time am I spending to do this manually today? And if there is some automated version, how much time can I save and what can I spend that time doing elsewhere? But I think what I find is when rubber meets the road, sometimes it actually doesn't have that outsized impact that you would say because the implementation and how it works within your specific organization is actually a little different from the way that you're doing things. So I like to say, and maybe you have some additional insights, but whenever like thinking about these like especially net new kind of AI tooling, I always like to not necessarily listen to the person that's selling me the solution, but like, okay, what does this look like in practice? Tell me case studies as to how, not just what the impact was, but like, how was it implemented? What is like the right type of organization that, will benefit most from this? So it's almost like not just saying AI is going to be the end all be all solution to all of our problems. Like it's a lot more involved than just AI will solve all the problems. I think it does need to be a fit, it needs to be a fit for the organization, a fit for your workflows, and also know exactly how you would implement it. So I don't know if that resonates with you or also resonates with Intraverbal, but I know that, this notion of AI will solve everything. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to solve more and more over time, but when rubber does meet the road, sometimes it doesn't work or falls flat on its face or is not giving that same level of outcome that you might have been initially promised.
Yeah, I mean, you walked into a dangerous area here when you talked about a philosophical approach here. So I'm going to go
Yeah.
all philosophical with my answer here. And I'm going to say, so in behavior analysis, our truth criterion is actually pragmatic, not necessarily objective. So, and what I mean by that is what's true to a behavior analyst is what works. So useful working is what's true. Um,
I like that.
Now, I think to your point, that differs for each company. So what works for each company is going to be different. Now, there's going to be similarities across companies. Obviously, you can't operate in the red forever. Your company has to have some sort of profit to survive. Even not-for-profit organizations need to show a profit so that they can continue being
Yeah.
sustainable. So I would say, I really like what you said there because I think that different AI tools, different technology tools in general,
Yeah.
need to be appropriately identified and fit for the individual organization, because an organization that exists where I am in South Florida versus where you are in New York, yeah, absolutely, are going to be different. And then it's going to be way different for us than those folks on the West Coast in California or in Oregon or something like that. So I like what you said there. I think that there's a lot of truth in finding solutions that fit specifically for the organization. And to your point, I think when organizations or individuals looking into this speak with companies like yours or mine, there should be representatives there that can provide those case studies and talk to them about what their needs are and how their organization can fit those needs.
I love it. I agree. It's the Wild West right now as it relates to I think a lot of these tooling. And I also do like to just bring it back. You mentioned machine learning before. Like AI it's a new concept, but I think a lot of the AI that does exist isn't as much like full on super genius AI as it is just like kind of like workflow automation, which doesn't always necessarily need to be its own sentient AI being. And so I think that's also sometimes people misname their technology solution as AI when actually it's just like a software platform that can maybe like do a few more things for you, a few more like bells and whistles to automate. Um, as maybe some like tactical advice to our customers thinking about like implementing an AI from your perspective, like what would you maybe view as some of like the red flags for a business that's trying to sell you one of these solutions versus like what are those positive signals that you're seeing? I have some thoughts there, but would love to understand, especially given someone who's building this type of company, this AI augmentation company, right? Would love to get your perspective on that in terms of to kind of sniff out the ones that are not actually, leveraging AI. Maybe it's just a team of people behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say, when you speak to people at these companies, they should be able to give you a at least basic explanation for how the technology works. And I would say specifically around PHI. So, and making the system HIPAA compliant,
Yeah.
because that's a big issue right now. I see with a lot of companies that are purporting to use AI is they don't have the safeguards in place to make sure that they're actually protecting that client information. So I think that's one of the red flags. I spoke to another AI company recently that had a whole bunch of positive green flags, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
They were able to explain to me in detail exactly what they were doing, how everything worked. And I didn't speak to the owner. I spoke to somebody that was director of sales. So, when other people at the organization know how the tech works, I think that that's always a positive sign because the people that work in our industry, we have our own, or behavior analysts have their own concerns. How is my client information going to be protected? um,
Totally.
how are we going to ensure accuracy along the way? So the people that work at these companies need to be able to answer those questions in terms that the ABA company owner will understand. Last thing I'll say really quickly, I remember going through a Stats 2 class in college, and I was speaking to the professor about it, and I was asking about how will I know when I really have a good understanding of the material? And he said, when you can explain this to your grandparents. So, and I thought that that was an interesting take on it. So I think that would be my advice. If you find somebody at these organizations that can explain to you in terms that you understand how their system works, I think that's a big green flag.
Yeah, for sure. I also like what you said there around like what is that training data that they're actually using to like contribute to whatever this AI outcome is. And
Yeah.
it's really important to understand like the protection of that data, what's feeding in, like is your data then and your customers' data going to get fed into that model as part of that overall contract because they want to keep like iterating and changing. I think that's something that a lot of folks don't maybe like read the fine print on and want to be like very cautious to make sure that data isn't being fed into something that's not protected, anonymized, et cetera. And you're right. If you do understand what that underlying data is and they can explain that to you, then generally speaking, they have some solution that is proprietary and in all likelihood quite, hopefully quite, beneficial for your organization. I know, I think as it relates to AI, we've kind of mentioned a few examples here, at least on the Flychain side, like we use AI for a few reasons here. Like one, it helps us just build code and do that much faster than historic, right? And I think historically, that's just a huge net benefit, especially for like software builders like us. I'm curious because all of the AI stuff that we do, we use AI to like help close those books and reconcile transactions, right? We train a bot to go and make sure everything is reconciled, except like claim to bank, matches, etc. Um, I'd love to get your perspective because so much of what we see and what we do is more on that like pure operational financial workflow. And I think what we're always very sensitive to, because we have no business talking about this, is more of like AI on that clinical side of the fence. And I'm a firm believer that like AI will not replace clinicians. But I'd love to get your perspective on that, especially given the work you're doing, which is more of that, I would say, like the augmentation of a human's time, if you will, time and the work that they're doing today. But yeah, I'd love to like maybe just pick, like, what do you think the AI kind of clinical side of that fence looks like in the next 12, 18, 24 months from your purview?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. And
Yeah,
things are
no one has the
moving.
crystal ball, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I don't have to tell you, things are moving so quickly. I talk to my wife about this all the time. She's also a behavior analyst, and I always tell her how difficult it is to forecast what's coming.
Yeah.
And everybody, and I'm sure you feel the same way, everybody in our business, I guess the tech side, has to be nimble, has to be able to quickly adjust. So I think from a clinical perspective, there's a few things that are going to change. So I'll start with education, and this is the big statement that I've been saying for the past year and a half, 2 years, is that throughout history, education has been primarily about teaching students to get the right answers. I think education is going to shift to teaching students to ask the right questions, because we're going to have access to all of these systems that are so powerful, that have so much information, that people need to know how to extract that information. And I'll use an industry slang here that you and I are familiar with, which is garbage in, garbage out. If you ask a bad question to these systems, it's going to give you a bad answer. So I think as instructors, and behavior analysts are, at least in part, instructors, they're going to have to get better at asking these systems the right type of questions to extract the insights that they're going to need. I think that's one. I think two, behavior analysts are going to shift from data collectors to data analyzers, and what we refer to as IOA experts, which is inter-observer agreement. So I think as the technology moves forward, it's going to get better at collecting data and presenting the data. And as a human being, you're going to need to be able to, as a behavior analyst, look at the real world environment and then look at the AI data and say, is it accurate? Is it correct? Is it reliably accurate? And that's going to be, I think, a big part, or a big role of the behavior analyst, is making sure the output is correct. And they're going to do that in two ways. Number one, being better prompters, so prompt engineers, and
Yep.
number two, data analyzers. Did that make sense?
It makes total sense. I mean, you struck a chord with me on the garbage in, garbage out side of the fence. I think we had said that many, many times previously. And again, like how we think about AI, it's all about the data and the integrity of that data going into it. And I'll give an example, at least from the front lines of Flychain, where we now have our like AI CFO, right? And when it took us a long time to get there, because like we could have launched our AI CFO 12 months ago. We could have, but the underlying data that we were walking into, being a quick in QuickBooks, backdated, miscategorized, or even not granular enough, like asking the AI CFO, how can I improve my margin here? If we had put that onto any of those like chart of accounts that we had seen, it really wouldn't work because the underlying data was like inaccurate. Therefore, if you're asking it, how do I improve my net profit? Well, your net profit's already wrong, so therefore, like we're not going to get any sort of viable answer. Or if the data isn't granular enough and structured in a way that AI can go and easily understand and interpret that. And so, I think that's one of the exciting things that we see and we're pumped about here is like now that this AI CFO exists, it's now going and looking at the validated granular data set that we've kind of obsessed over for the last 2 years of how do we get that data accurate, granular, up to date, and also contextualized. So now when you ask that AI system, it's not even just looking at your like granular financials, but it's actually understanding the context of that data. And I think context is where AI can really benefit because it's looking not just at yours, but it's looking at how your data stacks up to similar businesses in ABA. And by looking at the context, the AI can be smart then and tell you things to do or ways to improve because it understands your business relative to the broader market or even a more maybe like siloed market. Geography and size is probably a better way to think about it. So we see it, we're excited by it. Again, we're not on that clinical side, so this is why it's so awesome to have you here and sharing some of those thoughts on your end.
Yeah, I would say to follow up on that, a lot of the quote unquote AI systems that people use, the large language models out there,
Yeah.
ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, Gemini, those are general purpose tools, and they're
Hmm.
fantastic to ask questions, generally speaking, about a variety of different topics. However, there's a lot of companies like yours and mine that specialize. And to your point about the data and the context, that's so important. So, up to this point, we launched our intraverbal chat July of last year. So, we're not even a year in, and we're coming up to about 100,000 questions asked in our
Wow.
system. Yeah, we're really excited. So we have a really good understanding of what ABA professionals want to know about and their interactions with these types of systems, what's important to them. And I think you're positioned in a great way as well, because yes, people can ask ChatGPT about QuickBooks or about finances, but you're really cornering the market on accounting and finance for ABA.
Right.
So your data set and your prompts on the back end are going to be specialized for that particular niche of our field. So your system is going to be, in a sense, and not to, you know, put too much shine on you guys here, but your system, in a sense, is going to be smarter than some of those general systems because you're going to have specialized data and specialized prompts. Am I understanding that well?
That's exactly right, right? It's to us, it's like those large language models, the open and ChatGPT, Claude, like they're just like basically scraping the entire world's internet, right? Like
There's that too.
for
Yeah,
lack of a better term, right? But what's not in the world's internet is like that proprietary data, right? That data
yeah,
set of like the small to medium size in our world, the small to medium size like financial ABA data doesn't really exist in these, it's just not readily available online. And so for us, it's really that like specific data set that, we're able to collect because we do the work to get the data in this accurate format. That's where we see like that kind of like holy grail as it relates to AI using proprietary data to help better. And it does create that flywheel, right? With every customer that can kind of contribute to this aggregated anonymized data set, it gets smarter and smarter. And I thought one thing you mentioned, which I can't stress enough, is like you said 100,000 questions. Like that is awesome. That's insane. But what we do, and I'm sure you're doing it too, is we want to know what are those burning questions that our customers are asking. So the cool thing, I think, also maybe when you're talking about like working with an AI native company, like I would always ask, how do you expect your products to improve over time? And so what I mean by that is we're recording, we know what the questions are that our customers are asking the system. So therefore, we want to make sure that those questions are being answered perfectly to their liking, but also we want to be more proactive. And I think that's the other kind of piece of this puzzle with AI is instead of maybe surfacing insights, like actually telling you, hey, this is what you can do right now. And it's a function of knowing that, okay, these owners have asked the same 75 questions over and over and over and over again. To answer that, does the question already answer itself through the system? Or do we need to build more product? Do we need to build like more analytics that will then serve to answer that question? I'll give one really clear example here. Our system today, you can ask it like, how can I improve net profit margin? And then it's going to look and benchmark all of your expenses, your contracted rates, your payroll, like how you're compensating your staff. Like all of that's really, really valuable. But to take it one step further, and some of our customers will say, can I hire another BCBA right now? Okay, well, that does now, we need to build some more stuff there to make sure we understand profitability per BCBA and mapping that data. So I like to say that we use that AI tool as a way for us to like almost read our customer's mind a little bit in terms of product development, because if they're asking the questions and our system can't answer it, but we know it can with some additional tooling, it helps inform that product roadmap. So I do like this notion of AI kind of creating a really close, accurate product feedback back loop for software companies. And I would definitely, if you're thinking about exploring these AI solutions, how are they going to incorporate your feedback and what you need to their improvement of the product over time?
Yeah, I mean, now you're really getting into the interesting part of the tech here
Yeah.
because, there's an acronym in AI, RLHF, so reinforcement learning with human feedback. So
Yep.
our system, for example, we do not train our system using customer data, at least not the way that larger systems like ChatGPT and
Right.
Claude and that sort of thing do. So we train our system to search, to be better at searching for the data that people want. So, for example, we connected our system to variety of different academic publishers so that when people ask questions of our system, like you said, they're not getting answers from scrape data on the internet. They're getting answers from the literature, the
Yep.
journal articles, where the majority of the information about our science lives. So we teach our system to be better at searching. And then to your earlier point, we're teaching our system to ask better follow-up questions. So when somebody asks a question, if it's a clinical question, very basic, what is behavior? We'll give an answer to what is behavior, but then we'll ask a follow-up. Do you want to understand what the environment is, what a stimulus is, that sort of thing? And I think that's a little bit about what you're talking about here is we're learning more and more about our customers and about behavior analysts in general about what their interests are and how to better serve them when they interact with these systems.
Totally agree. Totally agree. But no, hey, Adam, like this has been a really enlightening conversation. I don't want to take up more of your time. I think there's a lot of like cool kernels here that we've uncovered. Just as we wrap things up, like where can people find you? Where can they learn more about Intraverbal? I again can't speak more highly about the product and see the clear results that it does have, as you've alluded to today, from certainly time savings, augmentation of that clinical staff. Where can people find you? Any upcoming conferences you'll be at, hosting, et cetera? Want to give you a little bit of a chance to plug yourself here.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. So the only social media platform that I regularly use is LinkedIn. So I post on LinkedIn on a regular basis. You can find me at Adam Ventura. Same thing with Intraverbal. Intraverbal posts regularly on LinkedIn. We also have an Instagram for Intraverbal, but I'm not a huge fan of social media, so I let the marketing folks take care of that. And then I will be presenting at ABAI this year, and then the ABA Cares Summit,
Yep.
and then a couple of other conferences in the fall. So yeah, they can check me out there. And if they're interested in more information about Intraverbal, they can go to intraverbal.ai and or reach out to us at info@intraverbal.ai.
Awesome, Adam. Well, I'll see you at the ABA Cares Conference. We'll get to hang out in person there. But
Absolutely.
really appreciate you spending some time with us today. And again, best of luck. We love your product and would encourage everyone to check it out.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Talk to you
All right.
soon.
Take care, Adam.